Hello everybody. Alright, so today we have a Switch OLED here for a mod chip. This is what you would normally use, this kind of kit. Today we're going to be doing the Kamikaze variant, and I like to use enamel wire, so we're not going to use the DAT0 adapter, and we are not going to use the board flex. Instead, I'm going to use some enamel wire to make the connections to the board, and I feel that is much more robust. The board flex is easier than dealing with wire, but I just like the wire. I feel like it is easier in terms of knowing I got good connections on everything, being able to independently solder different points. I've had these where if you nudge them just wrong, they'll break one or two of the solder joints. Independent wires is just sturdier. And we're going to be securing those wires in place even more with UV Cure solder mask. I got mine from Northridge Fix, along with my UV light. Again, Northridge Fix. That's not the point. As good as Northridge Fix is, this isn't an advertisement for him. I'm going to show you modding an OLED. This board here, with the USB port on it, this is what you would use. You'd connect it to, this is a 3-in-1 style chip, you'd connect it to this port here for flashing the firmware on this RP2040, which is the same chip on the Raspberry Pi Pico, which is why these are called PicoFlies. And you flash the firmware. I've already flashed the latest firmware on this. It's 2.8 from Rahias/USK on GitHub. So we've got the latest firmware on this chip. Usually they come pre-flashed. You usually don't have to bother with the flashing. But if you need to, these are usually included in your kit. And it's quite easy. You just hold down the boot button while you plug in the USB cable. I usually plug in this board, plug in the USB, and hold this all down and hold the button, and then plug the USB into the computer with my other hand. That is the easiest way I've found to do it. Otherwise, I wind up damaging this connector. I've ripped these tabs right off. It's quite easy to do. So I won't be needing any of those moving forward. The only thing I really like the flexes for is I like the CPU flex, incorporating the MOSFETs and supporting components right into it. There's a metal stiffener on the other side. A common thing people will get wrong during an install that'll cause it not to work, or it'll work and then not work when they put it back together, is there's a metal bar in there and they'll route this over the metal bar, so those components are touching. They'd be touching metal, which is not good. You want this to go under that metal bar, and I'm gonna show you that when we get there too. Is that camera angled right? There we go. That should be better. This is our console. This is some form of special edition. I'm not sure which one this is. I'm not all that up to date on my special edition switches. But the first thing to do, as with any switch, is to get this thing open. I believe on the OLED it's the two topmost screws on the rails. On the V1 and V2 it's the center screw. I might have those backwards, sometimes I mix those up. These are really easy to strip, especially if you're using the wrong screwdriver bit. The one I like to use is Phillips 00. You want to make sure you're putting down pressure on the screwdriver, pressing down while you're unscrewing, so that way your tool gets good engagement, because the stripping happens when you cam out, when your screwdriver comes out of that groove. That is when you start to do damage, and we don't want to do damage, especially not because this is a customer switch. I don't believe anyone could do any damage by seeing the serial number, but I would rather not show the serial number on camera. These screws are tri-wing. I use tri-wing 1.5. The Y 1.5 that came with the cheap Amazon kit I got 3 years ago. No reason to buy fancy tools. You can do any of this with the cheap stuff. That iron was $23 and it works fine. No SD card. You do want to take special note when you're taking these apart, because if you have an SD card in here, it'll be sticking out just far enough where if you try to rip this back plate up without taking that out, you can very easily damage the SD card. The customer did send a 1TB SD card. I'm going to be setting that up separately. That won't be in this video. The point of this video is not the software setup. It changes often enough that I don't want to make a dedicated video to it. There is a guide that is constantly being updated. The Shiza guide, switch hacking, is still easy. And yes, I'm aware that's poop in German. I am not directly affiliated with that guide. I don't have the ability to edit it or anything, but I do use it. It is a good reference for setting up the software. I would recommend against groups like NH, if you know who that is. Their guide is intentionally wrong because they think certain things that aren't piracy are piracy, and so their software setup guide will leave you in a place where you can't do what you're intending to do. So I wouldn't follow their guide. I would also avoid packs like hats from Aesthetics. It has quite a lot of extra stuff in it that most people don't need, as well as it's missing a lot of stuff that some people would want but may not know exists. And while it is better now than it used to be, it is still misconfigured. Its Hikate IPL is not configured properly. I believe we are ready to go ahead and remove this back plate. Now, this is a hard job. I've done quite a few of these. I'm used to it. But if you've never soldered anything before, I cannot recommend this as a first project at all. I would recommend you find something else. Get some practice in, get comfortable soldering small. Old phones are good for that. But the CPU points we're going to be soldering to are tiny. As well as, if you do this with a dead zero adapter, you have to take the whole board out and cut an extra shield, and there's a lot that can go wrong during an OLED install. Especially when you're doing it the way I'm doing it. I'm doing the Kamikaze method here. How did this come out? You always want to be gentle when you're taking these apart, because there is a mesh that is quite awkwardly positioned in the console. Took those screws out? Yes, I did. There we go. And it's just a little finicky. Keep wiggling, don't pull too hard or you will break it. It's quite thin plastic. And then another mistake, it's not really harmful or anything, but I still consider it a mistake people will make, is they'll take this tape off. You can leave this tape on. It is absolutely not in your way taking this apart. I would absolutely recommend you leave it in place, especially if you're going to be installing a clear backplate. You want this to look neat. You don't want this to be messy, wires everywhere, tape residue. In my opinion, this looks better than loose wires, and it's a lot more manageable. The tape's not coming up like this. It doesn't appear this one's ever actually been opened before, which is, I always love to see that it, is this the right? Yes. I always love to see that the console I'm working on hasn't been tampered with prior, because it's usually where you'll run into trouble if you run a service like this, is especially like the customer themselves, they will attempt the mod and then ask you to do the mod. And some of them will be completely honest and say they made the attempt. Some will pretend they didn't make the attempt. You'll get in there, there'll be spiky solder all over the place, and clearly there's flux residue everywhere. You ask the customer, and they'll respond either, oh yeah, I was in there, or, my favorite, how'd that happen? It's always the case when you discover something in a device that you weren't expecting. How'd that happen? It's like, one time, I was taking a laptop apart for a simple, it should have been a simple repaste, replacing the thermal paste. I get in there, and there is what I could only assume was like old rancid, like chunks of milk stuck in the device, and I walked away and I called the customer, like, hey, someone spilled milk on this. And we actually got accused of doing that ourselves. So, yes. So, while I do video, most of my repairs, only some of them get uploaded because I'm usually not happy with the end product. I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to that sort of thing. Having a video of you taking the device apart and discovering the problem is really helpful when you run into those certain kinds of folk who are apt to deny the moon landing, so to speak. A big conspiracy to get them to spend money. I put milk in your device at least a couple months ago, and it definitely was me. Wow, it's a little sparse on the pink goop in this one. It looks like it was making contact, but there was not a lot. I am going to be replacing the goop. My replacement goop is K5 Pro. I find it works quite well enough. The SoC and the switch doesn't draw all that much power. And beyond that, it's been underclocked into oblivion to meet their battery life requirements. Powerful this is not, essentially. And I'm just starting off by cleaning this so that it doesn't wind up on every surface on my workbench, because that's what happens with any sort of paste. If you don't stay on top of keeping it clean as you work. Right, set this aside for safekeeping. I like to lay my screws out as well in roughly the order and location I got them from. Left, right, sort of skipping slots to indicate far distances. It's a whole thing. It's not required by any means, but organization really does help because you can't lose a screw on a completely clean desk. There's a white sheet of plastic here blocking the screw to remove the game card slot and SD reader, which also has the audio jack embedded into it. I'm going to be gentle. The connector is right here. That black pad is meant to apply a gentle pressure to it to keep it from disconnecting when you like tap or hit the console on stuff. It's almost like Nintendo's been doing this for a while. They know how to build something that functions. Which is a positive thing you can say about Nintendo. The console works, even if there are other practices, especially lately, have been frustrating, I guess is a decent word for it. Nintendo has been frustrating to deal with recently. Oh, and it appears I've made a mistake. Before you touch anything else, once you get access to this connector, you should be disconnecting the battery. Anytime you work on electronics, you should be disconnecting the battery as soon as you have access to it. I miss it in laptops when you could disconnect these externally. That was always nice. It's not like a certain couple models of the Microsoft Surface where you have to remove the motherboard in order to disconnect the battery, which has caused me enough problems. If you're working on such a device, I definitely recommend you go out of your way to drain the battery as completely as possible before disassembly. There is a little bit of adhesive underneath this fan, or not the fan, but the fins, the fin stack. And I'm trying. It's the most trouble I think one's ever given me. You don't want to bend the copper pipe. If you collapse it, the cooling will be dramatically decreased. You also don't want to bend the fins themselves. There we go. Just trying to be as gentle as you can. Electronics are delicate at this size. It's not like working on a car where you can beat on your battery with a hammer and it'll be fine. You can't do that here. You just want to release the thermal paste. Oop. It's quite dry. Again, I'm going to be taking the shield off to solder to the CPU capacitors. So I'm going to go ahead and clean the thermal paste, or it will be everywhere by the time I'm done. Oh. I'm not sure if that's a factory defect or if someone has actually been in here. edge of the CPU shroud here is bent and mangled. I'm not sure if that happened at the factory or if I'm not the first person who's been in here. It seemed quite fresh. So I'm leaning towards the factory installed the shield improperly, which is fine. I'll straighten that out. Suppose we should get the heatsink as well. Now I've got thermal paste on my hand. Not fun. Alright. I'm going to move my screwdriver bit. Now, you do not technically need to remove this fan, but it is, in my opinion, far easier to connect both the fan flex and the power button flex if the fan is loose, and so I remove it. Since I'm taking the board out, I want things to be as smooth as possible. I don't want to accidentally damage anything. Because when you accidentally damage something, that costs money. You can't just tell the customer, oh, it got broke. Guess you don't have to pay me, here's your device back. No. If I were to damage the switch, I'd be responsible for repairing it. All the board screws are the same size, so I always just bunch them together. Again, goes against my organization rule, but ideally, you stay as organized as you possibly reasonably can manage. If you feel you don't need to organize, then don't. Now these screws for the USB port are longer. If you screw these in the wrong spot, you can damage things. So do not mix those up. You may be thinking, I have forgotten to undo the display connector. But in fact, I leave it to the very last. Oh, I've forgotten the screw. I also pull this screw from the frame, and then you can lift the corner of this up, and it's much easier to remove the motherboard when you do so. And then the display connector, you want to go out as straight as you possibly can, because there are 2 layers of pins in here. And they are very, very easy, especially on the way back in, straight as possible. Because if you bend one of those pins, you will wind up with display glitches or no display at all, and you'll get only sound or display, but no backlight. You don't want to mess with that. I have these connectors on hand. If I were to damage it, I could fix it, but you do want to avoid damaging it in the first place, of course. We can now set the body of the switch aside and move on to the motherboard. I have my trusty microscope. This thing is awful. It says 1080p, but the screen is not. It records 1080p, but honestly the bitrate's so low it doesn't look like it. It literally just says microscope under that sticker there. Like, it's not a fantastic product. This was meant to be rebranded to whatever name, and it just wasn't. It was very funny. But it does record. So I will be able to show you pretty good close-ups. I know the visual quality isn't all that. There's, I believe, our buck chip. Here's BQ, that's our battery charge chip. On earlier versions of the OLED, it was on the back, right over here, where we now find M92. M92 was here, and BQ was here on the older version. Our eMMC is here, but I won't be installing the adapter, so we're not going to be removing this plate. This chip, this little chip right here is known as the fuel gauge IC. This is the Max, I think it's 1750, something like that. If I could get good light. $17,150, $450, something like that. I don't remember. And I have them in stock. That's what matters. But you want to avoid. This side has the battery connector, and when you're lifting up the corner of the board here, it is all too easy if you're using a tool to damage this chip or one of the resistors next to it and cause problems. And you don't want to cause problems. Nobody wants to cause problems. We want to solve problems. Well, most of us want to solve problems. Oh. So coffee. Okay. And for such a job as removing the shielding from the CPU. I use an ordinary sewing needle. I literally bought the cheapest sewing kit from Walmart and robbed one of the needles out of it, specifically to bend these clamps out slightly. This one's already mangled, as we discovered. But I like to sneak it in that gap right there. Just far enough. Oop. You only want to bend it far enough so that it will slip over its catch, and you can bend it back later. You see it's just past its catch there. There are a few of these over the board. I don't need the microscope for this part, but it does make filming easier. You know, my big sausage fingers are getting in the way of the camera. This one's tricky because there's another shield in the way. I believe it's the wireless chipset under this shield, which makes sense because this antenna line's going this way. You can see they've left all the pads from when they were tuning these antennas. A lot of remnants of the original prototype boards wind up in these final products, and it's really cool when you learn to read those a bit. Of course, you would leave those pads. You wouldn't remove them because, after all, they do change the profile of this line. They change the impedance, and therefore they change the tuning. So if you were to replace these pads with more line, you would change the profile of this antenna, and you would then need to tune it again. Potentially, it may still work, but it wouldn't be quite so efficient. And real products need to meet regulation. Regulatory guys don't take oopsie for an answer. Unless you throw them $1 billion, in which case they may well take oopsie for an answer. Alright. I should be able to... I do use a nail for this. Bad practice, I know. There we go. Here's that metal bar I was talking about. You want your flex in the end to go underneath it and not over it. Otherwise it'll short, and it'll prevent you from closing the shield down over top of it because these sit flush. Clean the the thermal paste off of the shield here. Some alcohol. You can see what I'm doing? Oh, you can. That's completely by accident. But it'll be intentional when I zoom into it, because you couldn't see from all the way up there. Oh yeah. I suppose this damage really was done in the factory. Forgive me for the poor visuals. Really hard to do this and film it. Alright, so that's I'll set that shield aside for now. Don't need it anymore until we modify it. There's two modifications I'll usually do to it. I bend it so that it does not interfere with our CPU flex, and then I'll bend it so that it does not interfere with the clock point. Now, I'm going to be gentle, 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 gentle when dealing with these capacitors. There's our Tegra. Good old NVIDIA. Everybody loves NVIDIA. Of course. Who could dislike NVIDIA? Except for anyone who's ever run Linux, anything, ever. No. It's kind of a shame what NVIDIA did to EVGA. So awful to work with that EVGA gave up dealing with them. Unfair terms for board partners and the like. Gamers Nexus has a good video on that. So, I do the meticulous cleaning work that I like to do. I'll explain some of the reasons beyond piracy, because we don't condone piracy here. Don't pirate anything. Of course not. But beyond piracy, when you're modding your Switch like this, you get access to overclock the SoC. You give up some battery life for that, but there is plenty of power and thermal headroom on this console. You are not going to run into those limits. Well, then you will. There are still limits, and they're quite low, but there's plenty of headroom, is what I'm trying to say. Compared to an unmodified Switch, some games actually become playable versus being 12 FPS nothing fests. There is modding, offline only, of course. You can modify games, you can hack to all your heart's content in Breath of the Wild, give yourself infinite hearts on real hardware, anywhere you want. Yeah, overclocking, modifying games without cheating online, of course. You don't want to connect online with a modified game. That's just asking to be banned. And it is also, in my opinion, kind of immoral to cheat in games. Not only are you cheating yourself out of the enjoyment of becoming good at the games, you're cheating other people out of the enjoyment of not fighting a cheater. So I don't condone going around cheating in online games with a modified Switch. You will get banned pretty quickly if you do that anyway. On top of all that, you can back up all of your game carts. You can sidestep the annoying digital game DRM, where if the Switch is not your primary Switch, say you have a V1, which is your primary, and you have an OLED, which is the second Switch on your account. If you are traveling, say you're in a hotel for a week on the other side of the country, and you own Breath of the Wild, but your primary Switch is home, and you're offline, it will continue to kick you out of the game and eventually lock you out of it. I believe the virtual game carts have helped with that a little bit, but that's just an extra hassle to deal with. If you own the game, and the console verifies you own the game at the time of download, there should be no reason why that same console would then tell me I don't own the game just because I'm not connected to the internet. That's ridiculous. And it's not only Nintendo doing that. Sony and Microsoft are both guilty. I'm using accusatory language on purpose. They were guilty of this. In my opinion, it is a very negative thing. And it encourages these kinds of hacks. So you want to tell me I can't play Minecraft offline because this console's been offline a couple days and you can't verify I own the game. Get out of here. Just get right out of here. DRM is killing honest gaming. You get a better experience from a modified console than you do from the genuine experience, and it's very unfortunate. It appears we are now ready to begin soldering our CPU flex. Which is always what I like to do first. As mentioned, the flex goes under the metal bar. because the components, which are right here when this is lined up, would otherwise short on the metal. You don't want a short circuit. That is the opposite of what you want. Well, I suppose long circuit is an issue as well, though less fatal. You want the Goldilocks circuit. You want the circuit that's just right. And it did take me a few seconds to come up with that. Leave that entire bit in unedited. Very funny. I mean, there's no point trying to line this up right now. I gotta tag it down first. Fume extraction machine over here. Not today, cancer-causing fumes. This might get loud. I'm not sure how this is going to affect the audio. Solder. I'm using 0.3mm diameter solder for this. That is what I use for basically everything, because it's what I have. Oh no, I've heated the iron up on the wrong tip. I've got the wrong tip on the iron. It's still hot. Alright, we're gonna hot change this tip. Oh, I'm poking stuff. What the pliers are for. Okay, we're taking the iron apart. There we go. I did mention this was a really cheap iron from Amazon, yeah? This is a pain. I'll get a nice iron when this one dies. Or there'll be a rush because I waited until the last minute and I'll just get another cheap one because it's fast. Oh man. Let's see. It's hot. It's hot. Don't use your fingers to screw in a hot soldering iron. Don't do this. Okay. Well, I could figure out how to put stuff back where I found it. We're gonna use 360 should be an okay starting point. This iron isn't very consistent with what temperature is going to work on a particular day. This is not a great tool. And while I can pretend I use this because tools for the common man, I'm just cheap. You can still do this job with very cheap tools. But if you have nice ones, please use them. Don't do this to yourself. I like to solder the points first. And then the anchors. I don't have any way to verify this, but I feel like it gives you a better connection. Or rather, not a better connection, but a connection with less stress in it. That is my suspicion. A bit too much solder. I'm going to go slowly, because you can always add more solder. Taking away solder is a little bit more difficult. Can still be done, of course it can. But it's kind of a pain. I'm going to flex down there. May well need more heat for the anchor points, but then again we may not. If I use the back side of this curved iron tip, it can transfer a lot more heat than just the tip alone can manage. And it does appear 360 is working out well for us today. Some days it won't, and I need to go to 380. But I believe that's an issue with this cheap iron I use. And this cheap microscope makes things a little difficult as well. But we want these connected without spilling over and being taller to the best of our ability, because they would block the shield going back down in place. I may have bridged that cap. Alright then, I'm really not sure where my camera ran out of storage. I should have been paying closer attention to that. We're gonna, once again, just in case it was missed, verify that we have connection, diode mode, cheap meter, not, it's not bad, but it was cheap. Red probe to ground in diode mode, 0.029, 0.027, somewhere in that range, good. 0.001, that's ground, good. .028, good. 0.001, good. And then I touched this guy with solder a little bit. This top connection is ground anyway, so that's not short to ground. Bottom connection 0.027, and then they're not short together either. Good. And I'm basically not recording, am I? No. Oh. I was recording the whole time and I just stopped the recording. I am so good at filming stuff. Please don't hire me for filming stuff. Okay. Now that step's out of the way. But on an OLED, that is not the most difficult step. Now, the most difficult step on the OLED, if you're doing Kamikaze, turn the iron off for now, clean it. I'm going to keep these clean, and you don't want to leave them on, or you'll damage the tips. They'll oxidize and pit and bad stuff. So, if you're not going to use it, clean it, turn it off. No, so with Kamikaze, we have to come across here. Oh, I've bent my tweezers. Come across here using these 3 holes as a reference point and dig a hole in the motherboard. And then also, we've got to cut this shielding because there is a point right here we need to scrape the solder mask off of and solder to that, which is the clock point. And we also need to solder a wire to this resistor here, that's our A point. And our reset point, our B point, is that guy right there. Not the triangle next to it. You don't want to short to that triangle because that triangle is ground. Okay. Alright, so I've got my God Hands, which is the name brand of these nippers. My action plan is usually cut by this leg and then cut in this corner and desolder this leg or bend it out of shape. I'd love to get good footage of that, but I'm not sure I'm capable of getting good footage of that. So we'll see how this turns out. This is meant to be my plastic only set so that they didn't get dulled, but I have somehow lost my metal set, which I have to replace every so often. So I suppose I'll buy new plastic ones. These are incredibly good. The God Hands. They're worth the extra couple of bucks, in my opinion, over your non-name brand, even like Best. I used to buy nippers from Best, which is the brand that Northridge Fix stocks, I believe. But these are just, they've been more reliable, in my experience. I do believe this is serviceable footage of this. I'll have to congratulate myself later on that. You want to be careful. It's very easy to... Oh, why is this moving around so much? Stop it. Very easy to damage the corner of the SoC here. I've contacted it, as you might be able to see. I haven't done any damage, so. No functional damage anyway. And the shielding is very brittle. Is brittle the right word? I'm not sure. It breaks from working stress very easily. So you just have to wiggle it back and forth a couple times and it'll break. Yeah, see, look at the ends. Already chipped on these. Still in better shape after one cut than some of the other brands I tried. They're ruined after one switch. They weren't that much cheaper than these. I think this pair was like 15 bucks. The goal of what I'm doing at the moment is I'm trying to limit the... I might just cut it. That worked. I'm trying to keep this from sticking up and interfering with the shield. And now that we've got that out of the way, we can actually do our modifications on the shield itself. So the point we're interested in is right there. Which means this tab is going to get bent in so that it does not contact I don't usually cut the shield. I just sort of fold it over with my tweezers. That way I'm not creating any new sharp edges. As you can see, that gap is right over the clock point. Man, I'm shaky. Right there. I am really shaky. I might not be able to do the Kamikaze right now. I might have to go take a nap or drink more coffee or something. But I would like to prep for the Kamikaze, even if I wind up being too shaky. Ooh, this is sticking up a little bit. Flush. Alright. So it's really easy. A lot of people will take a needle to this, or like a pick or something to that effect. I use a grinding pen. This is the Ma Ant D1. And it's actually very easy to go too deep with this. Using it on the lowest setting, and that was incredibly fast, I believe. Though we have a good enough surface to solder to now. Seems so. And so that's our clock point. This here is our A point. And right about there is our Kamikaze. Just got a scam call from someone claiming to be Comcast, and they are canceling the 50% discount on my account. Don't believe those kinds of things. In the first place, Comcast isn't going to call you to tell you a deal is expiring. Don't fall for that. But also, you should be aware of the terms of your network provider service. You should definitely, if you haven't in a while, check your bill. See if it's higher than it should be. Because I just had to renegotiate my bill with them. So I know my terms don't include a 50% discount. And so I wouldn't have believed that in the first place because I just know the terms. But I also know it's a scam. So don't fall for those scam phone calls. That's my PSA for the day. I've got a lot of those. Maybe I should start calling them hourly and not daily. Just referencing real quick exactly, I can't remember top or bottom here. Top of the bottom. And I like to use, because I have a ton of this stuff and it's clear-ish, I like to use Captain tape, or Kapton tape, however you want to pronounce it. It's got a good straight edge on it. That's crooked. So the edge is only as straight as my hands are steady. My hands are pretty steady, but I don't know, maybe it's recording. I seem to be having some shakes. That puts our point right about there. Guess we're going to go ahead and do the Kamikaze since the clock point went well. We're not going to use the needle, it's just to scratch it. It is more or less in line with the top of this capacitor. What I'll see a lot of people do, and I would caution against it, is they will make a really big square here. Real big square. And they'll wind up grinding part of this line away. You don't want to do that. This line's very important. This is the command CMD signal for the eMMC. And if this line is behaving strangely, you will have booting issues in the original firmware, at least, if not complete failure to boot in either mode. And or purple screen. So you don't want to damage that resistor or its line at all, if you can avoid it. And we're going to be going down through the solder mask. What I'm going to do is just every so often, Q-tip with alcohol on it, come in and clean that away. You'll see what I mean about how easy it is to go too far with this tool. Here in a moment you're going to stop seeing copper, and we're at a space between layers here. I'll stop again, Clean away this copper dust. And just like that, we're down one layer. I'm going to break through one more layer. Get a little steep of an angle here. Readjust my tool. Clean away some copper. Now I heard a trick. Let's see if this works. Shine some UV light on that. Oh. Oh. That's cool. That looks really cool. And like most things tech and dangerous, you kind of want to go slow and be careful and double and triple check. Now, I'm not sure how useful this actually is here. It's more useful if it's wet. It seems like wet is good. I don't know what I'm seeing there. Oh. The bright bits. I see. The bright bits are the areas in between the copper. That is handy. It's really cool. That's really cool. Appears to reveal I am not far back enough in these first two layers to get to the D0 point. There we go. Put a line on screen so that you can kind of see that is lined up with the top of those 3 dots exactly. There's a it's really funny. There's a factory defect on my microscope screen, and there's a straight line all the way across the screen that wasn't there when I bought it, but it appeared sometime after. But it is perfectly straight, so I can actually use that to make these kind of lineups on the fly. Personally, I find really funny. But, you know, being able to see the gaps in between the copper with the UV light, that is really handy. I didn't actually know about that until someone told me, of course. I just hadn't had another Kamikaze to try it on. Dat zero should be, make sure we've got the right line here. Oh, I'm in the wrong mode. Diode mode, red to ground, 0.493, that's in range. I believe that's our line. I don't know, they relocated an entire charge chip. I'm surprised they didn't move this. This is the exact same spot this line is in on this version of the OLED versus the launch version of the OLED, which has the BQ on the back of the board. But then again, screwing with these very important lines near the SoC is an undertaking. Take it from someone who's done a little bit of board design work. Our next step, ideally, is to use some solder mask to isolate the ground, because this thing is in a sea of ground. Even this other bit of exposed copper here is ground. If you were the worrying type, now would be a good time to take this, put it back on the console, and make sure it still works. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, we're going to move on to, there we go. Oh no. Uh-oh. My solder mask is going off, maybe. Does stuff expire? I haven't used it in a minute. Or am I out? Well, I don't have solder mask, so I'm going to have to overnight some solder mask. That's highly unfortunate. I did all this setup and I don't even have my solder mask. Alright, well, I cannot proceed without it. I could. There are alternatives, but I will not proceed without it, because this is a customer's device. It is not my device to be willy-nilly with the process. I suppose next you see me, I'll have a full cup of coffee and some solder mask. So, I have grabbed the cheapest solder mask I could find on Amazon because it was overnight. Is that a good choice? I suppose we shall find out together. I've got some more of the decent stuff on the way, just in case this is bad, but it'll take a couple days. Comes a little needle head. And alright. Wow, it would probably be really, really easy to use way too much with this. I'm going to do what I normally do and put some on the platform here. Wow. Okay, syringe is decidedly not my favorite way to apply this. It's my first time buying a syringe of solder mask, and I already don't recommend it. I don't need the grinding pin anymore, put that away. Gonna get my needle here. And we are going to... Alright, it looks like a little much. Apply some there. I like to also apply some next to the clock point on this ground, just so I don't accidentally connect to it. And I also expose this ground just a little bit. Go ahead and just be abundantly cautious. I have used way too much solder mask. That's not going to cure properly, so let's scoop some of that off. There's the problem with using Q-tips, is they leave this fluff behind. Gotta be careful about it. It's a much more reasonable amount of solder mask. In fact, it might not be enough now. But we care more about this top side. Insulating that from accidental solder bridging. So that should be quite alright. Then we want to come down here. And we want this. this stuff actually spread pretty cleanly. I mean, if this holds up well, I might just buy this stuff from now on. Yeah, the reason I do these both at the same time is because even in the microscope, they look kind of far apart because you gotta move the board. But they're actually quite close together. And my UV light covers them both. And so I've got this 10-watt UV lamp that turns off automatically in about 30 seconds. I'm going to run that 3 times or so. I'm going to let that cure up and we'll be back. And we're alive. Let's see how well that's set up. Tap it with the iron, make sure it's not soft and squishy. Well, it's soft, but it appears to be cured. Oh, this thing isn't too loud and annoying because we're going to need it again. I do not want to catch turbo cancer from flux fumes. I don't know if turbo cancer is a real thing, but I certainly don't want to find out. Turn this light back up just a smidge. The thing about using enameled wire like this is, as you can see, the enamel goes all the way to the end here. So you gotta be careful and make sure you actually burn the enamel off so you're not creating cold solder joints by just having the enamel stuck in the solder insulating the wire. Just sort of weighing the wire down with my tweezers. You can maybe see, I don't know, it seems like it's a little difficult. The enamel's burned off and the wire, or the solder is sticking to the wire. That's what you want to see. I like to bend the wire so that it goes out and behind the screw post. Oh no, I wasn't recording on the microscope, so you couldn't see any of what the hell I was talking about. But anyway, this is the red coating is that enamel. You can see here I burned the enamel away with the soldering iron and the solder is sticking. And then I've bent the wire here so that it, you probably bend it a little more. You want it to kind of neutrally rest near where you're going to solder it down. Kind of need to be holding that with my tweezers. Maybe just go ahead and trim it short. That works. These wires are so light, it's really easy to knock them around when you don't mean to. Sort of got the wire following this nice, neat path along the shielding. Avoiding that ground point, which we covered, and then tacking down onto the board there. Oh no. You really don't want to do what I just did, because it's really easy to rip this pad off the board, and that's not what you want to do at all. So I'm going to re-tack this because I've fatigued that solder, and flowing it helps release any stress that has been introduced into the wire or the solder. Oh, I have successfully desoldered it. That was not my intention. The next Gaius Van Belsar over here. Such devastation. Myriad is not playing nice with me today. It's usually the easier point to take care of out of the ones on this side of the board. I'm a little concerned because it appears we've put some solder on the ground point there. No, it looks like we're clear. And at this point, it would be smart to test diode mode, red to ground, 0.54, we have a connection. Good. I'm hitting it with the hot air merely to dry it. And then I want to add some more solder mask. That's way too much. That's way too much. This stuff's thick. idea here is this will help prevent this wire from moving around so much. Because the more it moves, the more it fatigues that joint. Just vibrations, traveling in a car, shaking it around. And the more these wires move, the more likely those joints are to crack. And when the joints crack, the mod starts to fail, and that's not good. I'm gonna cure this again, and we'll be back. I gotta switch memory cards anyway. Why does it suddenly say I'm going to get 2 hours of footage? Those other cards already have filled? Oh, okay. Alright. I've actually hit record on the microscope this time. While I was freeing up space on my SD cards, I went ahead and I pre-cut some wires and tinned them. One here for our data 0 line. And one here for our 8-point resistor. Wires are really tiny and they want to jump everywhere as soon as you touch them. Wow, I've got a bit of a headache going. Alright. I'm going to hit this with some flux. Now, this resistor, oh, my iron's cold. This resistor that we're about to solder to is a 0201 resistor. Now I'm just dropping stuff. This is a 0201 resistor, which is the size. So it's quite small. This is the head of a sewing needle. It is a 4.7 kilo ohm resistor, and as I may have mentioned earlier, this resistor is required for the console to boot into the original firmware, and for the mod chip to properly communicate with the the eMMC, the flash storage. And this resistor is also heat sensitive, as most electrical components are, but this one especially so. If you overheat this resistor, it will stop resisting properly, so to speak. You may burn it out, in which case it will become potentially an open circuit. And then you'll get purple screen or complete refusal to boot whatsoever. So you do want to be quick and gentle with this resistor. And just generally, any heat you use in this area, you want to be conservative about it. What you don't want to do is be bad at using tweezers, like I apparently am. This wants to twist the wrong way. I think I've proven you want to strive to be better than I am at this, and you probably don't want to stop where I'm at, because apparently I'm really bad with tweezers. And then I've bent the end of this wire not just like this 90-degree, but I've also angled the tip down so that it's making good contact underneath to the board. I'm actually going to earmark these a particular direction. I apologize that you can't see. I just needed to be able to see more than the camera. I'm actually going to avoid covering this area with solder mask because this DAT 0 point may need to be retouched at some point or tested, and I would like to leave it exposed so that I can get a meter on it. But I do still want to secure the wires a little bit, which is why we're going to go and do it this way. secure. This may take a couple of runs of the light. Run it one more time with just the light centered a little better, since I don't have to hold it anymore. You're going to leave your iron heated for a long time. You want to keep cleaning it so that it doesn't oxidize. Sometimes you're going to want to add more solder. And just to be safe, I'm going to run this one more time after it finishes here. To be nice and cured and secure, so the wires don't get jumbled up and I can tell which ones are which. You don't have to worry about half of any of this if you use the flex, but as I mentioned before, I don't much like the flex. Could, for sanity's sake here, go ahead and prod this diode mode red to ground. .5, .49. Attribute that to my probe getting a bad contact. Yeah, 0.49, 0.57. Those are in range. Looks like our soldering's alright. Alright. Now, I'm going to shut this off for now. Instead of doing the rest of the soldering, I'm going to get the mod chip in place. We can move the microscope for now, and we'll talk about how this works. So, first off, you don't want greasy fingerprints on the die here, and you don't want tape to cover this. So you do want that to be pretty clean. That's our thermal surface for the die. But I do like to put a little bit of Kapton tape over SP1, SP2, wherever my Kapton tape has wound up, which appears to be nowhere. Oh, it's right here. It was underneath something, and unfortunately I do not have X-ray vision. Where'd my scissors go? Suppose a chip knife will do. That didn't work at all. Piece was way too wide. You want to make sure you do not cover the thermal surface with thermally insulating tape, because then it will overheat, or at best it'll have a hot spot on the edge, and you don't want that. Okay. And then we had slightly modified this already to accommodate the clock point. We also need to modify this to accommodate our CPU flex. And our CPU flex lands right on this clasp here that we had bent. And that clasp is on a tab. So what I like to do is I just like to bend that tab over, not cut anything. I don't want sharp edges. Just want to bend that over. bent metal is way less sharp than cut metal. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to get this to focus. That looks alright. But I've just bent that tab over on the inside, and the wire goes through right there. And then we need to straighten the clasps we bent. Just do that with the back end of my tweezers for this to snap back on properly. Straight. And some people will remove this copper to just remove one more layer from the thermal interface. I don't see that as being anywhere close to necessary. I like to keep as much of the shielding intact as possible, because interference can be an issue. And so I choose to leave it in place, and it does not significantly impact the temperatures this system will run at. And then since it's a bare chip, you should spread the thermal paste. You cannot rely on the pressure from the cooler to spread this evenly. You need contact as full as possible. And then we're ready to go ahead and press this back into place. Alright. Again. Clean the thermal surface, and we are done as far as that goes. Next, I'm going to apply my double-sided adhesive. I use 4965 Tessa double-sided adhesive. This roll is 2 millimeters wide. You don't need to get stuff this wide. In fact, I ordered this by mistake. I usually get the 1 or the 1.5 millimeter. This is quite wide. But there's plenty of room on the back of this mod chip. And I just put 2 strips of adhesive on the back. And then when you secure this chip down, I haven't peeled the adhesive yet. When you secure this chip down, you want it as far right as you can get it on the shield. And you want it to be in line with this cable, so that this cable is bent straight. And you don't want to press down and crease this cable. You want to keep that bend radius as large as possible, because bending flexes can ultimately break the copper inside if bent too tightly. Just going to peel the adhesive backing that we just applied. I like to sort of line the edge up with just a bit of a gap. And again, don't press down too hard on this. Don't crease the CPU flex here, because you don't want to turn that into a 180-degree turn for the copper, because copper doesn't like that. Alright. And the next step for us would be get the microscope back in here. We're going to solder the reset point, the B point, on the back of the console. There is a point on the front. I can never quite remember where it's at, so I don't bother. It's part of why I removed these to work on them. See how that is just about as straight as I can get it. I should probably get a little more. And the relief cut here in the PCB to make space for the speaker wire is perfect to route our wire through. We're going to route it in and around. It's going to solder first on the back. Our point is right there. So we're going to get the awful loud smoke absorber back out, which may or may not actually be loud on video, but it is loud actually. Coffee. Go ahead and I missed. Pre-trim a piece of wire here. It's way too long, but that's alright. Get some flux on the end of the wire. Goal here, again, is to make sure the enamel melts and the solder actually sticks. Just like that. Tweezers. Flux. Microscope's out of focus. This wire's too long. They're annoying to deal with when they like that. That's going to fold under, just like that. Dry the area, because I do like to hit this with some solder mask. Prevent potential shorts. And now we wait. Why did my camera just switch into portrait mode? Stop it. Where do you see people? What face are you trying to take a picture of? Come on, Sony, what is this? That's what I get for using auto. I had my camera settings all figured out, but then I didn't touch the camera for a couple of months, and the battery ran dead, and it forgot them. And then I forgot what I had changed. I'm going to run this twice. Should be enough for that little amount. Almost done. There it is. Alright. So. Route this over here, and I'm not actually sure if there's an issue with routing this right next to this coil. This is the battery charge circuit. This coil should only be active while the battery's charging. I should hope it's fine. I wouldn't want high frequency noise to cause an issue. Yeah, I've cut this wire extremely too long. I do want a little more length than I need. Solder this to the B point. I hope this audio is usable. I didn't set my backup microphone up. And then this is one of those situations where you just want to be sure you're through that enamel. And then you want to continue holding that line. That joint doesn't look fantastic. I mean, maybe not enough flux, maybe not enough solder. I think there's not enough solder. We'll hold that until it solidifies. Usually I use another pair of tweezers for this. Just want to hold the wire at the end here. And I'm going to work this back and forth until the extra falls off. And in my opinion, it is just easier to solder them a little long and then break them off than it is to try and fiddle with that very end of the wire. And that is my preference. I'm going to try and route this a little bit away from that coil because I don't know how much interference that might introduce. And my needle has disappeared. There it is. The needle back on the magnetic section of the mat so it doesn't disappear again. And we're going to cure that once more. And you don't technically need to bend all these wires to try and make them look pretty, and you don't have to use solder mask, but I like to. I think it adds quality, and I have never had one of these come back for a broken joint, at least not yet. Although if one did come back, I would just fix it. Run it twice. The camera keeps flipping into portrait mode, and I'm really hoping that's not screwing with my file. I suppose we'll see. If this footage is unusable, that'll be unfortunate. Oh, it's still going. I thought it had finished. I was close. Here, you may already be saying, or you may not have noticed, but I haven't run the voltage and the ground yet. We will do that. I like to get the data lines taken care of first. So we have, this guy is our clock, which is the D point and not the C point. Which, honestly, I feel like the D point should be the eMMC, but no, that's the C point. Wire down here where we need it. A bit of flux. A bit of flux. Burn that enamel off. Good. It goes quicker with some flux. You want to keep pressure on the wire until you see it solidify. Again, we're going to hold this down, bend this back and forth to fatigue the wire and snap it eventually. Eventually, there we go. Right. Next wire. Right. Some flux, some heat and some metal. Trying to melt that enamel. good. Solder that in place. Hold pressure. Support the wire. I'm not cutting with this tool, I'm literally holding the wire so that we don't fatigue the actual pad on the board. I'm only holding the wire. I'm not cutting. Okay. Repeat the process again. And after this, it's 2 more times, one for a ground connection and one for 3.3 volt power. Good, we're through that enamel. Good. And then we're going to do 3.3 volts next. And a good tip I like to give people, if you're not using a flex, but your kit came with one, you can lay the flex over and just double check where the connection points are. I already knew these capacitors were it, but if you didn't know, it's fairly easy to check. And in the past, I've used bigger wire for this. There's not any actual reason to. I'm just going to use my enameled wire today. Oop, bridged something. Come on. How am I gonna get this to stay? Are my tweezers down on it? It works. Where? Oh, where? There it is, our wire. We're going to be stripping back much more enamel on this one because the connection point is longer. And it's much easier to strip enamel off the end of these wires. To remove some of the solder so I can be sure we don't connect to that other capacitor down there. That's it. The solder is solidifying and giving a lot of resistance, so I'm going to bump the heat up. Sometimes you just need a little bit more heat. As you saw, it was quite easy to accidentally put too much solder on this point and then bridge it. But as you can see now, it is not bridged. We are in the clear. Wire. Flex. Took off some enamel, tin the pad. Hold in place. Trim the wire. And I would support the wire with some solder mask, which I will cure again. I'm going to cure again. Isn't that a threat? Coffee. After this, I'm making cookies. And then we need to ground our mod chip. There is technically a ground path through the CPU flex. It is grounded back there, but you do want to separately solder the chip ground, because otherwise all of the return current for every circuit on this is either going to run through one of the other circuits, which is not good, or it'll run all of it through right next to those sensitive CPU capacitors and generate a bunch of noise. And while it may not necessarily cause an issue, it potentially could. So I recommend against that. You want to give all your signals a nice clean path to ground. That's our ground point there. That's an alternate B point, which I don't like that it's on here. Yeah, I don't like that being there, but it is what it is. And then we have a big fat grounded via right here. Or at least a pad. I'm not sure that it's a via because I can't see. That is not solder. Alright. Come on, Flux. Why is my flux so hard to dispense? I hate to tip it. There we go. I may need to bump the heat for this. We'll see. But these ground pads, they can soak up a lot of heat because they run to the ground layers in the whole board. I will need to bump the heat. Just for this connection, I'll bump it back down after to go back to the mod chip. Usually when soldering a ground connection, you will need some more heat versus your small little data lines. Getting that up to temperature is a lot easier. That's not what I meant to do. Need more flux. Why is this being so tough to dispense, man? I want flux. Well, that was quite a bit. That's alright. And we're not going to bother securing this one down because it is so short and it is going to a very, very, very strong section of the board. Just a ground pad in the ground. You're not going to rip that off the board. And if you do, you've got much, much larger problems. Success. I'm just brushing this off on a paper towel to get rid of the flux. And this is just ground, so you don't have to worry about this shorting to ground. But what we will double check is that we haven't shorted the nearby vias to ground. I don't know what they do, but if it wasn't ground before you started, it probably shouldn't be ground when you're done. Good, good, ground, good, okay. And make sure we didn't, I can clearly see we didn't. Make sure B is not ground. 3.3, D, A, C all have connections. And purely I forgot to clean this. And just like this. I think this looks so beautiful. We are done with this load thing. That is every connection soldered. I hope I didn't just lose that last piece of footage, because I didn't stop the recording before I turned off the microscope. Oh well, that's a future me problem. Future me hates past me. Give that guy more reasons. Future me can suck a fat one. Alright. And then my preferred next step is to put some tape on it. so that when the shield goes down over top, it doesn't get shorted out. You don't really want to cover BQ because I imagine that chip gets pretty hot. And it's the battery charging circuit. And if there is a circuit in here you want to keep nice and cool, it would be your charge circuit, because Nintendo did not do a fantastic job with the power system in this console. The most notorious failure on this unit is basically either BQ or M92 just stop working completely, and well, it doesn't charge after that. That was a big piece of wire I wasted. I'm gonna throw that in the drawer to maybe use on something else. Alright. Now that we're done that, the next thing to do is to test it. Get the body of the unit. And the first thing we're going to do is insert the display connector. You want to do that as straight as possible. And I like to do it before seating the motherboard into the case, because I feel like I get a better result that way. You want to ensure when you're putting this motherboard back in that you're not trapping your speaker wire. In fact, I usually plug this one back in now. You're not trapping either speaker wire or your Joy-Con rail or your power flat. There's a lot of stuff that is like in the way of this console going back together. Certainly was not designed to be repaired or worked on in any way, shape, or form. Can you blame Nintendo for that? I certainly do. Okay, what issue are we having here? I can't... There we go. So to be gentle, massage things back into place. The only wires you really need to connect for the test are the power button and the battery, but I'm going to go ahead and connect everything and put a couple screws back in. But I'm not going to put the cooler back on just yet. And the power button flex is another one of the ones with the multi-layer pins, but since it's a lot skinnier, it is a lot less dangerous to plug it in because it's less likely to bend a pin going in sideways because it's skinnier. The longer cable obviously makes it a lot harder. That is where a lot of people get tripped up on the OLED, on the V1, the V2, the light, especially the light. It's got two, just like the V1 and the V2 do, but it's a little more finicky. Is they will damage this connector. So I wind up replacing a lot of these connectors when they come in previously worked on. And the battery should be the very last thing you plug in when you're going back together, because you don't want to short something out. So you go to put a screw back in and you miss, and bad things can happen. You short out the wrong line at the wrong time and you've killed something permanently. Especially the display connector. Those lines go straight to the APU, the NVIDIA Tegra, under here. You don't want to be messing with that one with power to the board, because that's a mistake. It is a mistake every time. It will never not be a mistake. And I appear to have forgotten which screws go in now. I believe it's these ones. Go ahead and screw the fan down. This console had about 30% battery charge when I took it apart. You do want these to be a little charged when you do the mod. If only so you don't have to wait for it to charge before you can try to turn it on. Connect the battery. Press the power button. Yellow light. Blue light. It's training. It's trying to detect glitch timings right now. That's what training does. And that was a success. That one little yellow flash, no SD card, about 30% battery life. It looks like we are good. Go ahead and turn this guy back off. Want to you don't need to spread this layer out quite as much, since it's not directly contacting the die. When it comes to screws, I like to start this one first. Not tighten it, but start it, a couple threads. Then this one next. And then tighten this one. And then this one. And you probably can't see what I'm doing, can you? I'm really bad at filming. So I start this guy down here, bottom right. Then I start the one on the left, and then I start and tighten top right, then left, then bottom right. That's not important necessarily. I'm just in the habit of trying to give these things even pressure. And it can be important if you've mounted it crooked. You can have performance issues. But it's with this cooler design, it's basically impossible. The other issue with tightening a cooler unevenly is cracking the die, but this flimsy spring steel here is way not strong enough to crack that die. It'll flex way before that. Okay. Connecting our SD card and game card slot. And then before we go back on with our back plate, I have some K5 Pro to replace the pink goop that was in here. I don't know if this stuff is more performant, but it is highly performant. Come on. And that's way more than enough. But typically with something like that, more is better than not enough. Manually compress that a bit with my finger, since there was so much. It's really important when you're doing one of these to, after you've screwed everything down, but before you put the final backplate on, is test it again. Because sometimes if you've done it wrong, the mounting pressure of the backplate will cause the mod to fail. Or you may have routed something incorrectly and got it pinched under a screw, any sort of thing like that. You want to test before you go fully back together a second time. Where's my screwdriver gone? There it is. You definitely don't have to. But I also sort of follow a inner, outer, other side, kind of like a tire or a manifold on a car. And you do not have to, especially not just with this back plate. But I have had that ingrained in me. I do it on everything, and it's kind of a curse sometimes. And I've missed a screw. So that has to come back off. I've missed a screw. I'll tell you what screw I missed. I missed the screw we took out to loosen this bottom plate. And that screw is somewhat important because a loose bottom plate is good for no one. Unless you're into that sort of thing. forgetting all my screws today. I need to move the shield slightly just to get in here and tighten this one screw. And it still feels loose because that screw's not in. Okay. Alright. Hook this wire back down. Oop. Underneath the two little prongs. Come on. Be a little tough sometimes without good tweezers. As you saw, I didn't need to untape the antenna wires. Speaking of the antenna wires, don't forget to plug them back in. Make sure they're lined up before you press down. They are very fragile. It is easy to damage them. Line it up. And then press down. If you do damage the antennas, you'll have potentially poor Wi-Fi signal and worsened Bluetooth range, and for a handheld console, that is not what you want. So obviously you don't want to damage your antennas. I'm not actually sure which antenna is the Bluetooth. Oh, I've missed those screw hole. I'm not actually sure which antenna is the Bluetooth and which one is the Wi-Fi, or if they're sharing that duty. But it is obviously best to not damage either of them. And my camera still thinks it's portrait for some reason. Which is fine, I guess. As always, you want to keep good down pressure when you are tightening one of these screws, because you don't want to strip it. As you get close to bottoming the screw out, you want to slow down and feel for the end of the screw, and you don't want to keep trying to tighten it too much. These don't take a lot of torque. You work on enough devices, you can get really fast with the screws. And these are kind of long screws as well. I should probably switch to an electric screwdriver, but I'm like an old man. I want my screwdriver feel. I don't want no motor taking away my feel, my screwdriver tightness. I've got my calibrated torque wrench right here. And get everything good and tight. That German torque spec. Now you do want to be gentle, but also apply enough down pressure to avoid camming out and stripping the screws. I believe. And you can, when this is all together, you'll be able to see the mod chip through the bottom vent. That was much faster that time. Hello. And it still glitches. So I'm going to go ahead and put the back cover back on. You want to be careful to line up the vents. kind of a pain. Okay. And then first I'm going to tighten our tri-wings, which are these long ones. And these cannot take too much abuse. You want to definitely not over torque these, or they'll strip either this time or when you're taking them out next time. Screws on the bottom of the console. Make sure the home button actually stayed in, or the power button stayed in place. Sometimes these will slip out. You need to be careful with that. Don't forget the rail screws. Alright. Power it on. I can see the blue light through that vent right there. Glitch success. And you can actually bypass this screen. Volume up, volume down. So if you don't, and you see it still boots firmware, or the original firmware. I'm not going to do the software setup in this video. This was just for the mod. I'm not going to make a video on the software setup, as I believe I already said. But one thing you might get, if you bypass that no SD screen, you bypass that and you get a purple screen or it doesn't boot, the first place you are going to want to look for that is going to be that 8-point resistor. I'm going to get the software on this, back it up, create the emunand, get everything ready to go for the customer. There should be a link in the description to the guide that I follow for that. It was written by better people than me, and I have no problem pointing you to them rather than making my own video. And that should be good. We do take devices via mail-in. We're in Michigan. We only take devices within the US. I apologize if you are outside of that area. Dealing with business outside the US is just more hassle than it's worth at the moment. But if you're in the US and you want to send us a device to fix, our website's in the description. Feel free to send it in. This is repairs, mods, whatever you want, as long as it's within our scope of feasibility. If you're unsure if we do a job, you can email us. That is, again, in the description. And you guys have a nice day, and go fix something.